Yang Amat Mulia Tengku Besar Sri Menanti Tengku Ali Ridaudin Ibni Tuanku Mukris, Yang Teramat Mulia Bonda Datuk Paduka Tengku Khatijah binti Tengku Abdul Rahman Putra Al-Haj, Yang Teramat Mulia Ayahanda Datuk Sri Tengku Ahmad Nerang bin Tengku Abdul Rahman Putra Al-Haj, and Yang Berbahagia Datin Sri Liliana, Yang Berbahagia Tun Muhammad Zaidin Abdullah, Chairman of Ideas Council, Yang Amat Mulia Tengku Zain Al-Abidin Tuanku Muhriz, President of Ideas, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum, good morning. This is definitely more nerve-wracking than I thought it would be. To speak to such a distinguished forum today is both an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, Ideas, for inviting me. And writing these few words about my beloved grandfather, Yang Teramat Mulia Tengku, has been such a touching journey down memory lane. And to represent our family today is indeed humbling. When one Saiful approached me and he asked me to speak, he said, do 3 things. Firstly, shed some light on what lessons, our lessons from Tengku are still relevant. Secondly, he said, tell everyone whom you think Tengku would vote for if he were alive today. So I paused and I thought I'd better not get myself into trouble and panicked. But lastly, he said, you have 25 minutes to fill, which at that time sounded terribly long and daunting. But I promise you, I will answer the vote question before I sit down, and I make sure I'll do it properly. Because like Tengku always said, if you don't do things properly, I'll come after you. So please bear with me as I try to do justice for the legacy of Tengku, or as I simply called him, Tok. He may have been a father to the nation, but he was a grandfather to me. Other relatives actually called him Tok Tam. I think you can all guess why. Because he was actually quite dark. But he used to always point out that he was also tall and handsome. So how is a person's memory or legacy defined? Historians, politicians, biographers, and others browse for clues amongst past speeches, historical photos, diaries, recordings, and many more. And a lot of people have naturally wanted to learn about the Tengku. But for us, our archives are our hearts and our memories. My archive of Tok is not written on paper or recorded on film. It is one written in smiles, laughter, and sometimes even tears. This is an archive that I often visit in quiet moments when I remember Tok and my memories come flooding back. Tok is always remembered for the rousing cheers of Merdeka and his eloquence and his skill as a speaker. But Tok was different at home. He wouldn't make long speeches or lecture us. It wasn't his style. He would be subtle, indirect, and we often had to read between the lines because what he left unsaid was as important as what was said. I always remember the time when I received a letter from him when I was in England. I was studying at that time. And he asked me to come back and work for Wisma Putra. I didn't really understand what his intention was then. Perhaps it was simply because I'd been away so long, or perhaps he just wanted the family to be reunited. But when I got back, and I met Tok at his house in Penang some years ago, the first thing he said to me was, ingat tak balik dah? Buat apa lah duduk lama sangat? I just smiled, sensing there was something deeper behind what he had said. My mind went back to a story told to me by the late Tan Sri Raman Jalal when I was staying with him in Paris. He was the Malaysian ambassador then. He was a very close friend of Tok, and he was almost like an uncle to me. He told me about Tok's elder brother, Tengku Yusof, an officer in the Thai Armed Forces who passed away in 1915 and was buried in a Muslim cemetery in Bangkok. Naturally, his passing affected Tok greatly. But even we in the family never really suspected that he had a secret longing to reunite his brother with the land of his birth. So in 1975, Tan Sri helped Tunku to get permission that he needed from the Thai government. So both he and Tan Sri witnessed the exhumation of Tunku Yusuf's remains. And when Tunku Yusuf was laid into his final resting place at the Makam di Raja in Kedah, Tunku turned to Tan Sri and said, "Now that this is done, my duty is over. I don't mind now leaving the world anytime." For 60 long years, he had carried in his heart the desire that his brother would finally rest on Malaysian soil. It's strange how the nourishing earth of our country becomes our metaphor for home and of our love for it. The powerful words we sang just now, "Tanah tumpahnya darahku," were written by Tunku himself in 1957. For him, that line in Negaraku was not a mere lyric. It was his reason for being, his cause, his inspiration. So recalling this story, I finally understood the real reason for that letter that he sent to me. Because the love for Malaysia and its people meant everything to Tok. For him, there was no greater honor and privilege than to serve the country that he truly loved. Although my life's path did not eventually lead me to Wisma Putra, it was this deep, enduring love for Malaysia that had been Tok's real reason for calling me back. I read between the lines, and beneath this fond grandfather, there was simply a patriot. Later on, he used to tell me, "You should serve the country." Not many women do. Tunku was a man ahead of his time, because as early as 1959, he saw the possibility of a female prime minister, and I quote, "I, for one, am firmly convinced that women will have a greater part to play in the independent Malaya." Some of the most powerful women, like Indira Gandhi, admired Tunku. She used to call him uncle, and he in turn would speak highly of her. Tunku's eloquence and his ready wit meant that he built rapport with other leaders better than his neighbors, especially women leaders. Remember, he was tall, dark, and handsome. In fact, admiration for Tunku stretched even to the humblest man in the street. Uncle Raman used to tell me that when he was in India, that he saw a simple cow herd in a loincloth who was crossing the road with his cattle in a very remote village in India. When the cowherd asked him, "Where are you from?" he replied, "From Malaya." And the man immediately shouted, "Tunku Abdul Rahman." Uncle Rahman said he had never felt so proud of his prime minister. I never made it into politics, but his lessons have always inspired me to lead in the field that I am in. Tok was indeed blessed with compassion and humanity. He told everyone, "Accept me as I am, accept my weaknesses as well as my strengths." It was a message not to just us, to his immediate family, but to his extended family. He would always say to the millions of Malaysians, "Take each other as you are, accept your weaknesses as well as your strengths." You may have heard the story that he always tells about his mother, Cik Manjalara, who was the Sultan of Kedah's wife. He named me after his mother. The Sultan of Kedah had sentenced the keeper of the royal seal to be executed and to have the thumbs of his wife and children cut off because of an alleged dishonest act. Cik Manjalara appealed to the Sultan in the nick of time, claiming she was pregnant. but actually she wasn't. But because of her condition, no harm could be inflicted to anyone in the palace. Such is God's blessing that eventually she did really become pregnant and delivered a child. It was on 8th of February, 1903. It was a boy, and the boy was, of course, Tunku. So whenever people ask Tunku, where does this immense compassion for people come from? He would always relate this story, because his goodness came from God and from his mother, not from himself. In his life, Thot's legacy touched both young and old, from all backgrounds, in all parts of our nation. His example has inspired the generations who came after him, who know him only by stories. As we celebrate his life today, I would like to share a short video of ordinary Malaysians in their own words.
Seluruh negeri bersama-sama pahlawannya menunggu dengan berdebah-debah hati kelahiran negara dan zaman baru. Yang merdeka dan yang berdaulat serta berdasarkan kepada kebebasan dan keadilan dan mengekalkan keamanan di antara segala bangsa. Kuala Lumpur 31 hari bulan Ogos tahun 57.
Tunku represented, when he was the Prime Minister, when he was alive, the symbol of a true human being that Malaysia needs.
When you're a kid in school and they always ask you who do you want to grow up to be, who are your heroes and stuff, I think the name Tunku Abdul Rahman really comes to mind.
Tunku Abdul Rahman was a class of his own.
He believed that there was no race and everyone was a true Malaysian, because he was a true Malaysian.
You put you at ease immediately. Most of the time we are silent and the atmosphere is a bit, whether you can speak or not, a bit tight. And then suddenly there is a peal of laughter and you know that Tunku has come.
Dan setahu saya tu, dia tak pernah anggap Malaysia ni sebagai you are Chinese, you are Malay. Saya tak pernah dengar itu.
I will tell you, my own association with him, I met him at least 3-4 times. He was one of the warmest, humblest and cordial Prime Ministers that I have met.
Jadi orang tu senang di nak jumpa ke, nak berbincang ke, dia masuk. Jadi semua kata-kata kalau dia pergi pun orang kata tak payah nak cakap lah. Kalau buat appointment tu kata dia nak datang sambut ramai. Kalau dia datang itu kenara pun begitu, kalau orang panggil aku pergi. Pun tak ada orang kata nak tunggu. Ada macam kita buat special lah. Dia nak main kan. Dia tak ada dia jalan sama.
Patriotism, I think, was number one to him. I think he made all the sacrifices he had. And the other virtue that he had was determination. And that was really, really powerful.
When we had the confrontation with Indonesia, what did he tell the Malaysians? Please go and enjoy your work and your dinner in the house and let me take care of the bullets and the guns that the Indonesians are firing. He knew the need for unity of the country and he kept everybody happy.
And the step that he took, it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do, and I believe that not everyone can do what he does.
I think in the leader, what you really need is for someone that will fight for you.
And there was one occasion a beggar, elderly beggar, somehow rather slipped in our group and faced him and said, Tunku, I'm poor, I have no money. Can you please give me some money? So Tunku, yes, he took out his purse and gave him 100 ringgit. And then he said, you don't have any clothing. He said, no, Tunku, I don't have a clothing. You know what Tunku did? He took off his shirt and gave it to him, and they kept warm. And that poor guy was so frightened, he just ran away. so that is the kindness, the heart of Tunku. He always cared for the people.
Apart from my own father, I always consider him as my father, because we were all, the way he treated us, not just like citizens, whatever race we were, whatever age, whatever position, he had time for us.
He brought together all our races.
A lot of things that he has sacrificed in Malaysia that many people don't know about.
Beliau sanggup turun bersama-sama dengan rakyat jelata untuk sama-sama memikul senjata, kalau ibarat senjata, untuk memberi penerangan dan juga penjelasan kepada British pada masa itu bahawa kami, orang-orang penduduk di tanah Melayu, ingin merdeka.
We need his philosophy. We need his friendship. We need his wonderful leadership style, because he cared for people.
So respect one another, care for one another, love one another, work hard, and love your country.
I used to visit him once a month. He was very sick. Even in sickness, he said, how is that guy? How is this friend? And nobody bothered about it. So he died, a very sad man. And that is truly something he never deserved.
I am nothing without my country and my fellow Malaysians. This really answers that question. Who would Tunku vote for today? He would vote for Malaysia. He would remind us that politicians and parties may come and go, yet our nation will endure. I can remember as a little girl gathering around a table in Penang as we sang Happy Birthday, and he would blow out the candles on his cake and smile. Today, on his 112th birthday, we have no candles, but we can still light Tunku's spirit in each and every one of us.